Now let us proceed to the last one. It's entitled it "Stiff-Necked People." Well, not you. This is everybody but yourself. He says, "Stiff-necked people, concluding considerations concerning the nexus of culture, economics, and religion. Culture, economics, and religion in the new state of 1949-52." I hope you see, even though it sounds like I'm just parroting cliches, there's so much over here, and I'm leaving out so much because even 2, 3, 4 years of Israel had so much going on. If you take the trouble to look at it, that's all. You don't even need a microscope. You just put on glasses and you look what was happening in these formative years of the state. All the things they got right, all the things they got wrong. There are plenty on this column and plenty on that column, which is true, by the way, of the history of the United States of America also, if you know anything about it. Any country that gets along makes a lot of mistakes and gets some things right also. So that certainly happened in Israel. I touched very briefly on two issues that I want to concentrate on tonight. Earlier, I touched briefly on it, and one was the austerity regime that they tried to impose at Senate, as they call it, as we'll see in a minute. And the other side is going to be, I have the time left, about the Shabbos battles and what we would call today the Haredi, rise of a Haredi phenomenon in Israel, a very specific way, which, as we know, is a hot button item now because it's getting bigger all the time. And they, again, as I'm arguing all the way here, go back to, the 49, immediately after the war, 49, 51, 52, and those years. That's when the formative aspects of this all start. So let's start, first of all, with the rationing. I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention again, it's a very wonderful book, and I'm saying it for a reason, by Professor Collingham, Lizzie Collingham, it just came out this year, Taste of War, where she concentrates, she's a historian, she concentrates on World War II from the rationing aspect. Right? From the food side. It's an angle, you always want to find something about Abraham Lincoln and Kishkas. You want to find something that no one's done before, right? Abraham Lincoln and Kanedalach. So here, you want to see World War II, where they always talk about the battles, the politics, the diplomacy, all of which is, of course, of extreme importance, the Holocaust. But no one thought about the bureaucratic side of how you actually ran a war. Because the reason I mention it is because World War I, and particularly World War II, was the first time ever that countries assumed total control over the food that you ate every day. Think about what I'm saying. You go back a couple hundred years, or in the past, they didn't have that kind of apparatus. When a war was on, there was an army, which is usually not that big, right? They didn't have mass armies in the old days, and it was the job of somebody to find food for them, and the rest of the public out there was left to fend for themselves, and the farmers were not compelled to sell to the military or anything like that. Deals had to be cut, and they would grow more or less based on the economics of the supply and demand side, and somehow or other they got along, correct? And once in a while, a famine kicked in, everybody died from starvation. You had such things in the history of war, and that's the way it goes. Frankly, this is where Jews came in the pre-modern era, because in the long ago and down to 1700s, usually a king, a prince, or something like that would get a Jew. I'll give you an example. Wertheimer from Vienna, the famous, court Jew, Hofjude. Well, how do you get rich? How do you get money? Well, there's such a thing called an emperor. He's got wars with France. I'm just picking one out of many. And that's an army of, 50, 60,000 men, maybe a little more. That's 60,000 times 3 meals a day, correct? That's 60,000 times shoes, 60,000 times bullets, and so forth. And horses got to eat. And how do you do that? He didn't do it by rationing and introducing mass, control of the economy, all the rest of it. He knew a Jew who knew another guy, He knew a guy that dealt in horses. Where was there ever a case where Jews didn't deal in horses? So that's what they did, and in cattle and in meat. And he knew another guy who'd get a good deal on wheat over here, and another guy who might be able to bring in cherries, and and all of it had to come together. So you had to be a masterpiece of personal organization. These court Jews were quite remarkable. But when you get to the 20th century, it's not like that. You have mass armies in which the entire population is in the army or is in some kind of war-connected work or something like that. Everybody has to be more or less accounted for. When I say everybody, I mean almost everybody, but a huge percentage of the population. And then it becomes the object of the government over there to make sure that people got what to eat. Otherwise, you win the war, but everybody dies. And so what's really interesting, what she studies over here, this had a great impact on world thinking and also on Ben-Gurion and these guys in the late 40s, because they pulled it off. Sometimes more easily and sometimes less easy. But forget the United States. This is a land of good and plenty. But what about England, Russia, Japan, those kind of countries. Or for that matter, even what we call today third world countries who were in the war. India, where there was, by the way, a breakdown. People don't know this. In India, there was a breakdown in the food supply caused by Winston Churchill. And I think 4 or 5 million people died. Most people are just not aware of this. In I guess the eastern side, is that it? Yeah, the eastern side of India. A couple of provinces over there. There are books on it. And simply because, the food thing broke down. So when you think about all these countries and how they did it, it wasn't easy, for example, for Germany or for these other countries to put it together and make it happen. But they more or less did do it, okay? In some countries, they were down to eating this much a day, but they kind of calculated that you can, you're going to get along or not die, let's put it that way, not die with that small amount of food. On the other hand, there are other countries that had it better, but in England, just to take an example, they worked it out very famously, and this was the ones that inspired the Israeli example because they were part of the British Empire during the Second World War, were they not? They're a British mandate, and so they're very heavily, profoundly affected by the British example. And England pulled off a successful rationing business, not like America, of course, but everybody had enough. Nobody was full, but everybody had enough, and they had to replace this item with that item because this had to be imported and you couldn't bring it in. But the nutritionists came onto their own during the 1940s, and they made it work, okay? And national diets had to be modified and things like this, and they did do it. America is, of course, a different business, right? Thank God in this country there was rationing, but nobody was hungry. I mean, they didn't get you down to this much a day. Among other reasons, the public wouldn't stand for it, but it's also because they had enough food. They also had enough food. I remember in her book she talks about the fact that a lady says, from America, she says, World War II, I remember with horror, I couldn't get my coffee in the morning, you understand? And, you compare that, right? You compare that with people, in Russia, whatever, in China, in which they eat this much every day. So you understand what I'm saying. But nevertheless, there's Baltimore, Maryland. You've heard of that place, right? Here's rationing again. People go to the butcher, right? These are war posters. What's that? Yeah, not a lot. There was some, right? Which is always going to be, but nevertheless, that's a key element that he mentions over here. By the way, there are the dynamics of a rationing system. In World War II, at least for a while, everybody really got into the patriotic business. You understand? Let's put it this way. The public did understand. Certainly in places like Russia and England and Germany and Japan, the public did understand that this is a national necessity. The enemy is at the door. Our boys are holding the line. So we have to, do without temporarily. Here's a famous war poster, right? I will accept no ration goods without, what does it say on there? Without stamps and all this, but to put out by the government. Now it's true. Why do they have to put that out? In order to encourage people not to cheat. But the existential threat of wartime invasion created an objective environment, a climate of accepting the need for rationing, and a climate of deferment. Now we have sons, sweethearts, whatever, overseas, but one day they'll come home, and then we'll get back to regular. World War II rationing was basically fair, and so it was accepted, right? Let's go to the next one. Look at all the slogans, right? What's the idea of fair? Look at this. If you go by pure capitalism, only the rich lady can buy at the butcher shop. No, because if it goes strictly by supply and demand, how much is a chicken going to cost? How much is a piece of steak going to cost? There are always some people that can afford it, but only Miss La La La, not the regular lady, right? On the other hand, see that? If it's rationing, everybody gets fair. The notion of fairness, the equalization of the sacrifice and of the access to the foods was a very big part of all this. Same thing over here, right? A fair share for all of us. This is the name of the game. Now there were black markets, as he just said, always will be. But the question is, not too much or too much. That's the ultimate test of a successful rationing system, correct? Is it a big phenomenon or a small phenomenon? You had black people cheat a little with the butcher in America over the war, I know that, but not a lot. Basically, you went by the rations. Somebody needed a little extra here, a little extra there. It's not like you had in some countries in which the official market, like again Russia, there's nothing in the butcher shop. Everybody's in the black market. You didn't have that over here. So no, let's go back before this one. Yeah, here. The pay no more than the legal prices. Here's this is a U.S. poster, right? And they're trying to fight in World War II. Don't go to the black market. And like I say, everybody does it a little bit. You know when? You have a birthday party, you have a this, you have a that. You can't do it all the time, but once in a while. That's, like I say, you cannot totally erase human nature. But the question is, can you keep it down to a tolerable low level, or does it explode, as it were, and then it'll be an unfashionable? Of course, you could do the other way also, like Stalin. I mean, that's another way of fighting the black market, just shoot everybody. But, well, he tried to crush the black market, and to some degree he did, but you know something, it's human nature. Economics, people forget, is a fascinating discipline because it deals with human beings. Now, you can quantify it and make it into something technical, and they do, obviously. It's not my field. But what is economics all about? How do people react, you and I, under given this circumstance? What is, after all, the law of supply and demand? If there's a lot of money out there, you will do this. If there's a little amount of it, you will do that. If there's a war breakout, you'll naturally hoard. If you get what I'm saying? It's about human psychology and trying to figure out how things do. And so, you know, you try to do the propaganda like against the black market and all the rest of it. And if there is a perceived national threat, people will react, or the majority of people will react in this way. There will always be a few cheaters, but the majority. If the government is viewed as being full of baloney, people will react another way. You see? And so there was rationing very successfully in Germany and Japan, for example. Here's the Japanese market. Isn't that interesting? During the war. Japan had it bad. They didn't have a good rationing system. By the end of the war, majority of people were starving. Okay? I mean, you know, they wanted to fight to the last line if they didn't drop the A-bomb on them. But we know now, afterwards, that, oh, they were in bad shape. I mean, food-wise. You get it? You know, the children were dying and all this kind of stuff. But they would, you know, in the Japanese culture, you don't give in. And you don't admit. So basically, rationing means v'yachalta v'lo v'savata. Right? There'll be what to eat, but you never really be full. It won't be like the old days. In terms of quantity as well as quality. You won't get what you want, right? Unless you're the butcher's daughter, you know, or something like that. But you won't get what you want, but you get enough. If you don't get enough, then it's a different story. This was perceived around the world, and appropriately so, as a tremendously successful attempt at government operation of the economy, the kind of thing socialists love and the capitalists hate. Right? You see here from 1940 to 45 roughly, it really happened. The governments assumed total control of everything. They put in price regulations. They put in the supply and demand regulations. They controlled how much food goes to here and there. It was bureaucrats that did it, not the regular free market. And it worked. When I say it worked, there was everybody ate. Maybe velo savata, but everybody ate. There always were, in all these countries, what shall I say, little places that let off steam. They had what they call special shops. Special shops means if you're willing to pay $100 for a steak, you can do it. You know, they had that in London, they had it in Berlin, they had it in Moscow. They had everywhere. You get it? Because you have to let off a little bit of steam. And this lets off some of the social tension in there. If you get out of hand with that, then the public becomes resentful that how come these people have access to the special shops and the others don't. And so it's a balancing act on the part of the bureaucrats to make it all work. What's interesting is that even when World War II is over, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're back to a regular paradise of eating whatever you want. For example, England, you've heard of that country, when the war was over, they voted in the Labour government, Clement Attlee, and they immediately marched harsh to the left in terms of bringing in health, education, welfare for free health, free education, nationalization of the coal mines, and all that sort of, you know, very strong socialist kinds of things. A very strongly left-wing domestic economy. They're anti-communist, left-wing economy, which, of course, England could not afford because they were broke. Right? I mean, free health means somebody paying the doctor. England, literally, I mean, it's not funny. England was out of money. By 1945, they were out of money in 1941. That's why Roosevelt invented this thing called Lend-Lease, which is a obfuscation, really it's giveaway. Right? So this country gave away to Russia and England, you know, zillions in food, in ammunitions, in clothing, in supplies. I mean, it's amazing, you know? I mean, if you were an American manufacturer or farmer, it was good. But at the end of the day, it's Uncle Sam paying for it, not England. You follow? And so my point is that England put in the rationing, kept the rationing after the war for about 8 years or so. Think about what I'm saying. If you lived in England, 1947, 48, 49, you said the war's over. In England, you can only get this much bread and this much meat, rare meat, and, you know, a little bit of butter, and so on and so forth. And it's surprising that the war is over. Believe me, the Englishmen, if they could get a chance to visit America, the first thing they did was go to the restaurant and eat 10 steaks. We have many records of this. And the reason I'm saying it is the British said, see, rationing worked during the war, and so it can be a useful tool for the peacetime. The country is broke. It's got to build itself back up. Meanwhile, if we allow ordinary consumer habits to develop among the regular people, if everybody goes back to steak, we literally will we'll lose whatever little money we have that we're trying to put back together in the kitty, and it won't work. And so they kept up, by the way, heat was rationed. When they had cold waves in 1947, 48, it was no joke in London. It's like Israel, you had 2 hours of heat a day or things like this, and hot water for, an hour or two a day. It's England, mind you. And so it was a tough time, but I'm saying this again, rationing, government controls of the economy, the idea that bureaucrats and government people dictate what the public habits will be, was part of the international way of thinking in World War II. They wanted to have it in this country, but the Republicans won the election, and they crushed that in 1946. Truman was in favor of keeping up a certain amount of price controls and things like this. Taft, of course, was the leader of Republicans, the great enemy of this, and he ran on this. The Republican Party ran on this platform in 1946 and destroyed the Democratic Party. They won 2/3 of the seats in both houses. You see? That's why they passed the Taft-Hartley Act, because the Republicans had enough seats to take out the power of the unions, and when Truman vetoed it, they overrode the veto. It was a strong business. So it is what it is. The Conservative Party came back into power in 1951, after the Labor had been in there from 1945 to 51 under Churchill, and they've actually been in power mostly, if you know your figures, ever since. The majority of years the Conservatives have been in power, and people can't understand why, and there are many reasons for it, but in the 50s and 60s, one of the reasons was the Conservatives stood for the idea against rationing. When Churchill came in, it took them a year or two, and they got rid of the rationing. And even though people complain about this, that, and the other, you understand the middle-class person wants to say, I want to buy what I eat. I can't buy 1,000 steaks, but I want to, this wife, she wants to make the meal that she wants to make. And this guy wants to eat what he wants. It's one of those little things in life that you want autonomy in. So, it leads up to, and Margaret Thatcher has been the face of this also, as you know. So, was rationing a good thing or not? It's a machlokes. It's a matter of perspective. For conservatives, it was a necessary evil to be ended as soon as possible. Right? It was ended as soon as possible. For socialists, it was a ringingly successful affirmation of the core socialist ideals of a planned economy. It worked. We saved money. We won the war. We kept people in jobs. We made sure that not just the rich lady had food. It worked. So it was a lechatchila, so to speak. It's a good idea. In other words, the real socialists, a rationally rationed economy, is a lechatchila. It's an option. It's something you think is a good idea, even today in the year 2013. The entire theory of socialism, if you know it, is that the government knows best. I know in America they parody it, but I'm not speaking in terms of parody. Really, to be perfectly honest, do I know what's better for me to eat, or a nutritionist? I don't want to ask that question, but you know what I mean, right? If we're up to them, right? For real socialists, if we're up to them, there'll be no potato chips, no Coke, no cigarettes, and no booze. Right? But true or not? I think Michelle Obama is championing this idea, isn't she now? And you can definitely understand it. Well, I totally get it. But the skinny people get it, the fat people don't get it, right? They say, I want this, I want that. And is it right for the government to tell you what to do? This is an existential conflict. It's never going to go away. It's a matter of different perspectives. Even conservatives, except for Ron Paul freaks, are in favor, of course, of public health measures. I think so. Or I hope you're in favor of the government forcing you out of your house in Far Rockaway during Hurricane Sandy, right? And by the way, there were people who fought it. We all know that. So everybody that's normal agrees that there's a certain amount of government regulation economy where, like Edmund Burke said, you should want to do this because the government knows for you what's better than for you. But on the other hand, are you going to take it across the whole spectrum like they do in Israel? Don't wear black shoes, wear brown shoes. Right? Where's it going to go? One last observation before we engage with this in Israel. The middle class is the enemy of rationing. It's that element in society which historically is the enemy of rationing. The middle class, by definition, cannot afford the luxuries of the rich, but it does insist on the small luxuries. You see? So I don't have to have huge vacations in the Riviera or all the rest of it, but I want a house with heat, and I want my own bathroom, and I want to be able to eat what I want for breakfast. And I like the idea of going to the store and picking out whatever I want. And if I want potato chips, get the heck off my back. That's the middle class mentality. You understand? I can't afford big things, but the little things I have, don't take away from me. And I'll get very angry if somebody does. Now, with all that in mind, let's move to Israel. The first elections in Israel, there's Ben-Gurion in the first election, took place in January 25th, 49. So the war was still on, if you remember, the war with the Arabs, but it was basically winding down. It was January of 1949. The government was formed in February 15th of 1949. By April, as those of you who've been here in the series know, the government already perceived that if current conditions continue, because the war was still on in April, the war was still on, and the mass aliyah had begun. There'll be too many mouths to feed and too many bodies to clothe. As a result, the law of supply and demand will kick in and prices will rocket. True? If there's 1 million people need shoes and there's a limited number of shoes, the shoes will go up and only the rich will be able to, the rich will have food, the poor will starve. Remember what we said before? Rationing means a fair share for all of us. If you go purely by capitalism, she gets the food, she gets nothing. I mean nothing, if depending on the supply and demand. If there's no food, who's going to get it? And so the only way to prevent this, Ben-Gurion felt, and his colleagues, was to ration everything and subject to government regulation and price control. That's where it came through. Because otherwise we're going to have starvation in Israel, and then who knows what's going to happen. And we didn't found the Jewish state after 2,000 years, see it go down the tubes because they're such fools that, that all of a sudden there was no food. You see? That way, there will be food for all, satiety for none. Vichalta and navasavata. In addition, and I want you to understand, and they went at this gung-ho. They thought it's a good idea. Because England has done it, and England's still doing it. In 1949, in Great Britain, there's still a Labour government, and it's still rationing. And they are getting the economic benefits of rationing, even though they're getting the economic non-benefits of people grumbling. But, they're saving money, they're getting better distribution of food. It is helping the economy, or at least it was perceived to be helping the economy. And so it's not a crazy idea. Some of the leading countries in the world are doing it. Russia, for sure, still had rationing. And even when the Russians gave up rationing, anybody knows anything about Russia knows, there's all the black market anyway. And so, in addition, the Ben-Gurion and the Israeli government faced such gigantic expenses that the only way to pay the bills is to print money. Now, I know this has never happened in America, of course. They said, but the only way to prevent the funny money from resulting in rocketing and crippling inflation is to impose strict wage and price controls. Do you get it? In order to pay the bills, they got to print money. You print money, you have inflation. All of a sudden a shoe costs $1 million. As happened in Weimar Germany, did it not, as we all know. Okay. No, we're going to stop it. How are you going to stop that? We're going to make a rule that no one can sell shoes. It'll be illegal, except for $5. The wage and price controls is a tool the government's always used or try to use against inflation. But who created the inflation? The government, by printing more money. Why did the government print more money? Got to pay the bills. I mean, chas v'shalom, who knows where this country is going to go? We got 16 trillion, 17 trillion. It could be I don't say Obama's going to do it, but the guy after him or the guy after that might say, you know something? There's one way to make this all go away. The option is on the table, right? And by the way, the Chinese and everybody know this, correct? And so you can just always print the money. You wipe out the middle class. No, but at least we'll pay the bills, and then we'll start again. It's there. And so the only way to fight it is to introduce, as I say, wage and price controls. But what does that mean? To make such a system work, the government must exercise dictatorial control over the entire economy, which is what the combatant nations did during World War II. So who's to be the dictator? Who can handle such a gigantic and bureaucratic administrative challenge? After all, it's Israel. It's April and May of 1949. The country just started. It's people landing on the boat all the time, Salah Shabbati and so forth. It's the army still not totally demobilized, but they're about to. The whole thing's a chaos. How much of Israel had been wrecked in the fighting? Plenty, right? I'll give you an example. Jaffa was blown up, and many other towns. A place like Yerushalayim was blown up from the war, And so everything's an economic mess. how do you? I mean, it's easy for me to stand there and say wage and price controls, limits on this, controls on that. How do you actually do that? You have to have someone who loves bureaucracy and detail. There's certain people that are built out like that. Many are not, but some are. If you have a business, you better have at least one person like that, right? If you're also flying like I am, you're not going to be able to run a business, correct? You're going to have to. You understand what I'm saying? So the answer was Dov Yosef, the hero of the siege of Jerusalem. Okay, Mr. Handsome. Now a very interesting guy in Montreal. He's not a regular Zion, Montreal native. Grew up in 1899. Went to school and went to McGill. So he's like a Baltimore boy, so to speak. He got a law degree there at a young age. I think he even did some course in the University of London. What I'm trying to say is, here's a guy that's very different profile than the other Zionist leaders. He went to school. Ben Gurion, Ben Tzvi, Golda Meir, and the others were uneducated. It's amazing, right? They all preached the idea of going work on a kibbutz, so they didn't have a high school education. Golda Meir had a high school education, but which put her in a big league over there. But Beryl Katznelson, Ben Gurion, Ben Tzvi, Zalman Shazar, all these other guys, they're self-taught. Self-taught is self-taught. It's what it is. And they're the guys that put the country together. So it's one thing to lead a struggle, a political struggle. It's one thing to make speeches, all the rest of it, and be heroic. And it's another thing when the time comes, who can actually run the machine? You see? And so here's a guy who had a real education, a big Zionist. So he joins the Jabotinsky Jewish Legion in 1918 at a young age. Makes Aliyah early on. The University of London and McGill, that's a good university. Right, both of you. That's a good law degree, not a bad law degree. So I mean, that's like having roughly equivalent to an Ivy League law degree, which is pretty good. How many guys like that are in Palestine in the 1920s and 30s? None. And so therefore, he has a very successful legal career. And in 1933, decides to get involved in politics. Get involved in politics, he thinks to join the Mapai. Why did he join the Mapai? I wonder why. This is the one that's going somewhere, and they need him because how many educated guys that can write memoranda and deal with the government and all this sort of thing do they have? In 1948, he was a big macher in the Jewish Agency, and they made him the governor of Jerusalem during the siege. That was a tough situation. The Jordanians and the others, as you know, choked the city off, and Yerushalayim in those years, right? I mean, here the queues, trying to get food. When the city was blockaded, so how do you make water for the 100,000 Jews that live in Jerusalem every day to give enough water to drink? You know that you can't survive without water. They had to take trucks around. You can see pictures of it. How do you organize the food when the Arabs are preventing, the Baba Wa, the Arabs are preventing the food from getting in? And so you have to be very tough and very well organized in terms of enforcing strict rationing regime that everybody gets this much bread and this much this and this much that, and get it through the Arab lines. And if they don't get it through the Arab lines, you have to make it last longer. And so he did it, and therefore he demonstrated to people that he had a iron will and an administrative ability. And he actually wrote a book about it called Kiryat Ne'emanah, the faithful city, in which he describes the situations over there. And he was a tough guy. The Neturei Karta, you'll see later on, made a demonstration to surrender to the Arabs. And he says, I'll give you 2 minutes, I'll shoot. You understand? And anybody that suggests giving a white flag, we're going to kill him. He was a tough fellow. It's very interesting to read his speech because he was very colorless. And so all of his soldiers say, we need cigarettes too. And he says, do human beings can survive without cigarettes? And all that. If you're a smoker, you need a cigarette. You want us to fight? Get a cigarette. So they had to bring that through the lines also. And he had to learn the funny side of what you call rationing. But anyway, Ben Gurion appoints him, Dov Yosef, as the minister of austerity, as they call it. There's a certain name, Aspakat, supply, and something. And his job is to make a system and then make the system work. For Jews. And not only for Jews, but the ganze Welt. Ashkenazim, Sephardim, the nice guys, the crooks. Is everybody landing at Haifa port a tzaddik yisod olam? The people who survive the Holocaust. How does one do that? By being honest? Right? All kidding aside, how do you survive in the camps? How do you survive after the war? What qualities are created? These guys are coming in with PhDs in black marketeering. You understand? And now they're coming into Israel, and that's the time it was. His daughter, by the way, died a hero's death. Or she was in the Palmach or something just before the end of the war. It was a tough business, fighting the Egyptians. But anyway, the man and the job are perfectly matched because, as I said before, he loves this stuff. Figures, organization, appointing people, keeping up with how many grams of butter you should give somebody. He reveled in all this kind of business. Let me read you a short speech that he gives, introducing all this into the regime. You get a little bit of an idea. This is Dov Yosef in his first speech in Knesset saying what we're about to do. And he said, "We shall determine a modest and rational diet which alone will be available to the public, nothing else. We shall permit the production of luxury goods only for export and stop the importation of all the luxury goods. All imports will require licenses from my Ministry of Supplies and Rationing. Importers will be allowed to sell their goods only to wholesalers licensed by the Ministry of Supply and Rationing. Each wholesaler will be allowed to sell his goods only to a fixed number of retailers. Every retailer will have in his books a given number of consumers who will be allowed to buy only from him according to the coupon books which we issued to the entire population." So every makkolet, every butcher shop has a list of 20, 30, 40 customers, and that's the only place you can buy, You go to Shabbat, you go to Shabbat. You go to Lemberg, you go to Lemberg. That's it. You're not going to get from anybody else. You see, you got to get from there, and he's got to give you the books. The consumer will give the retailer the appropriate coupons, and the latter will turn them over to the Ministry of Supplies and Rationing. Notice the British system. That's how they ran it in England successfully during the war. And he's doing this when Salah Shabbati is coming over. In other words, you can imagine the attempt to impose Yekisha order on the mass importation and arrival in Israel of people for whom that's not exactly where they're holding. The newspapers called him Yosef HaMashbir. Yosef, the guy who's the provider. But his duties went beyond purveyance of wood. The government had determined what could be imported from abroad, in what quantities and at what prices. It also undertook to arrange much of the importation at the government's own expense, chiefly of raw materials and food products. The government organized, carried out, and financed the transport, the warehousing. It sold the goods according to its own criteria. To agriculturalists, to industrialists, it was the government which determined what the agriculturalists would grow, and the quantities and prices of the produce. It also regulated industry, production, quantities, and prices. The government also took part in the process of production. For example, in the case of grains, in March 49, the government seized possession of the grain and flour, and all the mill owners that had to do was supervise the milling in return for a fee. In other words, the government owns all the mills, literally. You understand? Thus, the government acted as the employer and the client to bring the price of wheat down, flour down. The government sold directly to the bakeries to wipe out the middlemen. These are all British tactics. Beginning in September 49, they saved time and increased productivity by baking a standard round loaf. You get? Well, this is what happens when you have government efficiency, standardization, dynamics, right? What do you need 5 different loaves of challah? No, that's it. It's enough. Okay. From then on, Israelis ate only standard round black bread by order. Do you remember this? Yeah, you remember that. Anyway, they undertook to determine who could sell what to whom, in what quantities, at what prices, and through which agents, which wholesalers, which retailers. It decided who would buy from whom, exclusively grocery shops, greengrocers, butchers, milkmen, fish, and chicken shops. Every individual and every family were tied to certain stores in their neighborhood. Only there could they get their food coupons. The grocers, the greengrocers, the butchers were entrusted with the distribution of the coupon books according to a list of consumers. They were made up of sheets of detachable coupons of numerous value. The distribution of the coupon books and the correct clipping of the coupons to match the rations turned the small retailers into agents of the government administration, and the customers were dependent on them. After a while, the restaurants were ordered to demand coupons from the customers, tourists as well as Israelis. The rations sold to the public were determined as often as once a day on the basis of availability and with an effort to maintain the minimum daily number of calories, which were 2,600 calories per day. I'm not a nutritionist, but some of you are, and you'll figure out what it is. No, you're not going to get fat on it, but you won't die. The time of distribution was always announced in the papers. In other words, the housewife has to, like the stock market, you have to follow every day the announcements of what is available today and what is not available and when is it available and what time. Carrots are being distributed in area number 8 of Tel Aviv. Individual ration, 250 grams. Price, 95 mils per kilogram. Coupons, page N, number 4. You see? It's that kind of a life. And remember, there's not a war going on. That's a key element of all this. Yeah, look at this. For example, I asked Howard to put it into ounces. It was easy for us to do. Bread is unlimited. That's a key element, and that reflects the Ben-Gurionist, East European. I don't know if you were raised like this, but the only food out there is bread and butter. That's how I was raised. But corn, 2 ounces, sugar, 2 ounces, a daily, flour, 2 ounces, rice, a tiny bit. I guess it costs them to import it. Legumes a tiny bit. Margarine, right? You can have the bread, but you can't have the margarine, right? Lakshan, that's very interesting. Cheese, 7 ounces, which is a lot. That's based on the idea that cheese is very necessary. They saw it. This is what the nutritionists do. They actually brought in a lady, a big nutritionist from Columbia University, and she wrote them up the figures. That's what happened. Onions, biscuits, how much meat? 26 ounces of meat a month. I can't see, so you're even better than me. So as you see, meat is not going to happen. Would you agree? Unless you do shtick with your butcher. Right? You can already see, let's put it this way. Have you heard of Shabbos? As soon as you see this, for a Frum family, they're already going to be starting to look for whatever. You see? But nevertheless, he said like this. Israel, as you know, didn't have cattle, didn't have chicken, they were just starting. Now they've developed, as a result of this, in the 1950s and 60s, in places like Kibbutz Yavne and other places like that, the chicken business. You understand? No, there's mass production of eggs and chickens and all the rest of it. But they didn't have it at that time. And so talk to me about steak. Where do you get steak in 1949 in Israel? Where do you get beef? And they don't grow it over there. You understand? And to import it from Argentina costs a fortune, and they don't want to spend that money to go chutz la'aretz for something they consider, or Dov Yosef considers, an unconscionable luxury. So this is not the, shall I say, Adam Smith mentality. It's the opposite. And as I say before, you get the idea of what's going on over here. Prices were low, but shortages oppressed the public. The daily burden fell, of course, on the housewife, which spent most of the time standing in line. And he has over here whole. I'll just read you very briefly a little paragraph of this. In most of the city's grocery stores, which don't have Tenuva or Tena products, there's hardly any fresh produce in the morning, since everyone had to do all their shopping at the same time because of the rules, right? Carrots are being available today from 9 to 11. You follow? So there was a lot of crowding and long lines. It's not like today where you choose to go shopping. In America, we're so consumerist, we're going to have the stores open all night. So the person, if they wish to, if they don't want to deal with the lines, they'll go 12:30 at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? No, not here. The produce was marketed little by little, and the official announcements were issued several times a week. And so one day was spent buying 200 grams of carrots, and the next day a quarter of a kilo of bananas, and so on and so forth. Meaning the Israel that we all made fun of, and we're so familiar with, of standing in long lines, starts now. It was not in the mandate period. It was not part of Zionism. It's not part of anything. It's the cultural legacy of the Dov Yosef period, which never totally left. Okay. Now that's why, for example, when Israelis have the opportunity, they'll free themselves to whatever they can in an orgy of things like, everybody in Israel has a cell phone. You have to understand. Besides the fact that it's convenient, it represents the fact I don't stand in line. I don't got to do nothing. I don't have to deal with the company and all the rest. I have autonomy. I can call whenever I want. I pay for it. You understand that this was not available literally in the period that I'm speaking about. Thus, the women had to return to the shop several times a week, and during the winter, the produce would have kept for a few days. Nevertheless, had to do it. The repeated visits to the grocery stores made the long lines an everyday occurrence. From the beginning of May, when the weather turned warm, the women had to go to the store every day since they didn't have no refrigerators. And the ice boxes, the produce only kept for a day or two. It's just, people can't even imagine without a refrigerator. Thus, paradoxically, as fruit and vegetables became more plentiful and varied with the onset of summer, the lines in front of the stores grew longer. You see? And I can read more and more about this, but I won't. You get the idea, which is that life became very difficult. And for the Israeli middle class, the people in Tel Aviv and Haifa and places like that, it really started to bother them. Okay? The mentality of Dov Yosef is the efficiency mentality and the bureaucratic one. Why give people eggs if dehydrated eggs are cheaper? So Israel imports all the dehydrated eggs, which is okay with me, but you know what I'm talking about. After 2-3 days, you look shiny, right? Meaning the public can't put up with this. If it was the Blitz and the German army's 5 miles away, so people say, I got to do what I got to do. If the Arabs were at the doors of Tel Aviv, and it's a war, they got to do what it is. But if it's peace, and they're just doing it because the bureaucrat figures, why waste money on eggs if I can get those eggs? Then all of a sudden the guy starts to hate the bureaucrats. That kind of mentality. If Dov Yosef had known about tofu That's all that would have been offered, right? Spices was unnecessary luxury, except for a certain amount of salt, because the doctors tell you need salt. That's how he thought. You get it? Pepper, foy, paprika, foy. Salt, the nutritionists say every human being needs a certain amount of salt. So he wasn't a bad guy at all. He actually meant very well. But you have over here the metamorphosing of a certain type of mentality, which I say before is going to run in clash with the public in general. And this is not Germany, where the public is disciplined. You see? So a great bureaucratic apparatus had to be erected. Every citizen was given ration cards, as I explained to you, and which worked only in particular makolet, and this whole point system allocated a certain amount of food daily or weekly, determined by the professional nutritionists, I say, who now were glorying because in World War II, nutritionism became the highly respected field. Here's the charts, the system. Ben-Gurion and Golda and others, they think this is great. This is a crackerjack system. This should be permanent. There are many speeches by Golda Meir at that time saying, Israel is not meant for people to be fat and luxurious, all the rest of it. It's meant to be, a Spartan, disciplined society in which, on the contrary, we turn our back on the Havlei Ha'olam and all the rest of it, and we concentrate on the important. Well, first of all, she herself didn't have to be under the system, and second of all, because the government minister is different, and second of all, you can feel that way, but why are you sticking on me? I repeat, they want it to be a permanent system. You get it? They thought it's a good idea. It does promote, and this is true, an egalitarian society. And this is a major goal of socialism. It is, by the way, a major goal of Obamacare. Right? In other words, now you're not dealing with economics, you're dealing with social values, and the mixing together of social values with economics is always controversial. That's what Obamacare controversy is all about, and many others. You get it? Because you're trying to make more equal the distribution in society, then you're interfering through government fiat in the regular laws of economics. Initially, under the impact of the war situation during 1949, at least for 6-8 months, the mass aliyah, the sheer thrill of statehood, and mutual discipline, the public did go along. There you have a typical scene, right? In every morning, every afternoon, whenever. I would even say that a whole Dov Yosef culture emerges. Let's see the next one. Look at this. Can you read it? The Tzena guarantees us bitachon. I can't see from my angle. Aliyah, klita, bitachon. Right? It's the tzav hasha'ah. It's the requirement of the time. These are patriotic posters who are saying that there's a reason for skimping. We need klita. We need to bring in the aliyah. We need to absorb the immigrants. And we have to pay for the army. That is true. It's not a lie. And we all have to tighten the belts. What does the other one say? I can't even see. Ma'av Ashel, I think. Imanot Tzena, yeah. This is already like one of these nutritionists on television. You can do a lot of things with tofu. You see? What can I cook? Notice advice to the housewife. What can I cook with the foods that are available, with manos hatzena, with the quantities, with the portions that are available over here. It wasn't tofu in Israel. The main thing, chatzilim. Okay? So, what can I do? Oh, you'd be surprised. You can do a lot of things with chatzilim. And I'll tell you, if you read these books, they'll tell you, so you can make a birthday cake out of it. No, I'm not kidding. You can make a birthday cake out of it. You can make a pudding. You can do a this. You can do a that. Right? Because obviously somebody was paid by the government to come up with ways. It is possible to do all these things. They have no connection, first of all, with the mentality of the consumer. But what does the mentality of the consumer have to do with anything? After all, we're dealing with life and death issues for a state that's facing existential challenges, and you should all be prepared to do whatever is necessary, that sort of thing. So, but after a while, by the time you get September, October, November of 1949, the whole thing looks open-ended. I mean, Golda Meir and the others, they say, this is a good idea, let's keep this up permanently, let's see the next 50, 100 years in Israel on tofu. All of a sudden, it's a bummer, and this tears away at the morale. Okay, I emphasize again, one of the reasons during World War II that the rationing was as successful as it was is because it was just understood. This is a temporary measure. We're in a war, and this is unpreventable. And but one day will be peace. Actually, what were the main songs in America and England? Oh, one day when the peace will come, when Johnny comes home marching home again. When the peace comes, then everything will go back to normal. And it's true. inherent problems become more prominent. For example, and this is something that Dov Yosef didn't want to acknowledge. The Jews. The Jews want margarine? Wait a minute. The Jews. What are you, racist? Talking about Bulgarian Jews. Talking about Romanian Jews. Talking about Russian Jews. You know what I'm talking about. Even you know this one likes tea and that one likes coffee. True? And culturally. Correct? The Sephardim want this and the other one wants this. This one cannot do without schnitzel. This one never heard of schnitzel. Right? No, there's one thing. And you're bringing in Me'arba Kanfas Haaretz. People are coming in from all types. From Germany, from, how can you make a national diet? If you're talking about Japan, it's a national diet. It's been molding over many centuries. It's rice, rice, rice. That's what they eat. Meaning, that's okay with them. Right? I have no problem with that. Now you're talking about Israel, brand new country, and everybody wants something else. And you say, so what's wrong with tofu? What's wrong with chatzilim? You say, you bring it to an immigrant from a country you never heard of it. You see? And so there it goes. The Bulgarians want more oil and less wheat. That's what they write to him. You get it. The distribution is not right. Give us more oil and give us less wheat. This has been a problem in World War II because countries like the British Empire and the others, who were very sophisticated, by the way, had to be able to supply the British Army. You have Muslim soldiers. I'll give you an example. India, Pakistan. India is the Hindus. Pakistan is the Muslims. Can't have chazer for these soldiers. On the other hand, you can for those soldiers. And so the British Army, because of their imperial experience, developed a long time a highly diversified food distribution system. Israel doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, the ethos in the first years of Israel, and Ben Gurion would like this, is melting pot. Everybody should drop their customs from home, come and speak Ivrit, just become Israeli, and forget all the rest of it, and of course it's ridiculous. But it's the idea being pushed by the government, and so all this is going to militate against the government going along, the population going along with this SANA, as they call it, this austerity program, the rationing. And finally, the iron laws of economics ensured the emergence of a black market, like you would say, right? I mean, the fact is, people want, chicken on Shabbos, right? Not 2-point-some ounces a month. People want this, that, and the other. And people the black market exists when there's something wrong with the distribution system because the public wants it, and the government for whatever reason won't allow it, and there we have it. In America today, for example, we call it drugs. Right? There's a million laws in the books, good laws against the drugs, but if you want it, just tell me when and where and how much. And it's a few blocks away from here. You all know this, okay? And the police know it, and they don't interfere with it. In fact, right now is nighttime in Baltimore, Maryland. I'll say no more, okay? But it's true. But it's true everywhere. No, I'm serious. And the iron law of economics is applied even in Stalin's Russia. That they shot everybody. All the rest of it. There's a black market on certain days in certain parts of the city, and that's where people go to get whatever they get, if they can afford it. Like prohibition, the black market grows and grows during the Sena period. That's the amount of food that was given there. But let's do the next one. I think. Yeah, look at this. I'm on a bad angle, but you can read it, can't you? Fight the black market. Isn't that? It's like a monster. What does it say? Hashuka Shachor. What is it? Asoncha? Is that it? Yeah, is a disaster. Is a disaster. But if the government has to put out cartoons against the black market, what does that mean? You understand? By the way, this is as old as the Bible. Correct? Did anybody know the book? I've just come to memory. Anybody know the book of Shmuel Aleph? It says King Saul wiped out all the witches, but then when he says to his aides, "Find me a witch," they say, "Oh, there's one down the block." Right? It's in the same parak. You get it? No, this you're not going to do away with unless you change the person's desires. That's much harder, right? To educate people, not to want drugs or whatever. That's something that's quite an impressive accomplishment. That doesn't happen so often. You understand? The government idea of rationing is, I'm not going to change your attitude. I'm just going to deprive you of the availability of it. And of course, that doesn't work. And so what happens is that you have the rise of a big black market. Dov Yosef is enraged about these. He tries to fight back. Look at this. Here's a cartoon from the Israeli paper. No. The police caught a lady. You get the picture. They caught a housewife with extra chickens, and they're shooting it to make sure that you won't be able to eat the chickens. You understand? He organizes raids on speakeasies. Here trucks. They stopped all the traffic on the Tel Aviv Haifa highway and the Jerusalem Tel Aviv highway, and they caught you with bad cigarettes. Like they say, chickens and things like that in the. Well, by the way, Yad HaSigonim Hayabrishona, among the big people who are doing the black marketing, the kibbutzniks, the kibbutzim. They're supposed to be the vanguard of the socialism. Yes, but you can make some extra money on the side. And so it is what the iron laws of economics, as I say, fight against this. It reminds us very much of Prohibition. And Dov Yosef, interestingly, in his first speech said, I don't want this to be like Prohibition America. I know what happened in Prohibition. But now you're talking about raids on speakeasies, right? And like we do today, raid on the drug establishment. Here's this chickens. It's your butter. You get it, the kibbutz is selling extra butter or things like that. By 1950, it's the public versus Dov Yosef, just like Prohibition. Get it? I don't know if you know the history of the state of Maryland. Most people don't. The governor in this state and the mayor in Baltimore said, we are not going to enforce the laws over here. And if you get arrested, there's no jury that will convict you. And even if there was, there's no judge that would sentence you. And even if there was, the next governor of this state, me, is going to pardon you. That's how people ran in the campaigns. You ever Ritchie Highway, Governor Ritchie? That's how they ran. Meaning that there was too wide of a gap between the law on the one hand and the public sentiment on the other, which is fatal in a democracy. Agreed? And then, as if oblivious to all this, adding insult to injury, Dov Yosef in 1950 extends rationing to clothes. Now, all the ladies that were nodding about, nutrition is a good idea, you should be skinny and all the rest of it, fine. Now you say clothes, you just create a new class of enemies, okay? Because they start something called lakol. Now you know what lakol means, right? And now tell me, what are lakol shoes? Well, I mean this. What are lakol skirts? What are lakol dresses? What are lakol pants for men and suits? This one size literally fits all, or one model. Because let's face it, then you save a lot of money, don't you? On the clothes manufacturing end. You just tell them, give me 6,000 skirts of this and this type, right? So many stockings of this and this type, and then it's gewaldig. And by the way, Golda Meir said like this will truly promote an egalitarian society. If you want to look like Golda Meir, Okay? And so what emerges? Emerges that you created a new class of enemy, the women. No, more than before. You understand? It's one thing to have to stand in line and put up for this. It's even worse if you say you don't tell me how I want to dress. And I think that's among the most personal of choices. Do you agree? Some dress better, some dress worse. It's my business, right? No, it isn't. It's the government's business because they're going to. And you can't argue with the logic of it, right? Because it's true. If you make one size of shoe, one type of shoe for everybody, you'll save money, and that money will be spent, hopefully, by building a house for Sal Shabati, right? But he said, the heck with that. I want my shoe that I want. See? I want it my way. I don't like that. I want this one. And so you end up with all this sort of business. As he puts over here, retailers had a hard time of this. The retailers rush, as is described, they rush over to get the merchandise for their shops. This is the Makolan owners, isn't it? First they go to the notice board on the ground floor of the big building in Tel Aviv, and they study the lists, which the officials in room 13 have pinned up. The retailers look for the names and serial numbers on the list, which have no more than 10 names at a time. The list emerged from room 13 in a slow trickle, because the produce reaches the city in a slow trickle, truck by truck, and then the inspectors in the warehouse have to check it and fill in their forms before the office can take over distribution to the retailers. 2 and even 3 and 4 hours pass this way. Scores and maybe hundreds of greengrocers arrive. Think about that. There are 300 greengrocers in Tel Aviv. The grocers go up and down the stairs between the notice board and room 13. They crowd the corridor and they wait. Meantime, the shops are standing empty. The women who went to buy vegetables for the midday dinner go in, look in, they see there's nothing in the store, they go back home. The grocer's wife, helper, keeps repeating, the produce has not yet arrived. Because, everybody's saying, no, where are the carrots? Where are the carrots? It hadn't arrived yet. Where are the carrots? Hadn't arrived yet. You understand? Something of the sort took place in lines for eggs, milk, meat, fish. Took 2 hours, sometimes longer, and sometimes it was in vain. By the time the housewife's turn came, the rations had run out, and she had to go empty-handed. And you understand, all this sort of thing that I'm talking about over here, right? I'll give you one more little piece over here. On the Thursday before Rosh Hashanah, my wife went to the market in Hadera. She stood in line at the butcher shop for an hour to get a chicken. It's Rosh Hashanah. When she got inside, no chickens left. She could not go elsewhere because there were 2 children waiting for her at home. At 5 in the afternoon after work, I went to another butcher shop, couldn't get anything. On Friday, my wife went to the butcher shop again, empty-handed. He applied to the local inspector of food distribution. He reassured us very politely, saying she would get the ration the following week after the holiday. My wife returned home, tired and angry, and I tried to look into the matter at the local supplies office. There I found a notice saying the office was open only on weekdays between 9 and 1. I can't get in there during these hours because I work outside Hadera. So, all the little type of thing that we understand, a battle between the middle class on the one hand and the government installations on the other hand. All we know is the average wife hates the cues that I just described. According to Dov Yosef, he's obtuse to all this. He said, "What are you complaining about?" And he gives charts. And he says, workers in Israel are getting 3 times as much bread as in Russia, 2 times as much milk, 10 times as much sugar, 4 times as much meat. What are you complaining about? Right? Notice, I want to tell you something. Compared to the Soviet Union, it was a paradise. Israelis didn't want to be compared to the Soviet Union. You understand? In Soviet Union, people die from malnutrition, and nobody can complain about it because the paradise Russia will shoot you. This is not a base of, I'm sure Israel's also better than, Somalia or something like that. That's not the standard that we're looking for. Israeli families are not comparing themselves to Stalin. They're comparing themselves to the most famous and popular poster in America during World War II. Right? Norman Rockwell. Right? This is the one the GIs, they always say, GIs had girls painted on the side, and I'm sure that's true too. But the number one poster that was popular among the soldiers from the South Pacific to Normandy to all over the place, this picture. That's what they're fighting for. You understand? And the Israelis can see it also. He said, that's what I want. Now you might say like this, why are you comparing yourself to America? That's how people are. What are you going to do? You understand? People say, I came to Israel, I want a shot at it. And I can't afford it every day, but at least at Rosh Hashanah. Right? And you know, the housewife is always was and always will be the balancer of the budget. She says we're going to do without food this and this and this, so we'll have it for Purim. Correct? 4 weeks without, but 1 week with. But I want to be able to do at least that. And you're depriving me of that, and sometimes for silly reasons as I described before. I told you, economics is a human science, has to do with what people think. You can't do what Dov Yosef says, is forget the human side and go strictly by the facts. It doesn't work that way. He offers recipes. This is great. He offers porridge made from crushed matzah, herring and yogurt, sardine dumplings and diluted milk, and a whole bunch of other culinary winners. You understand? And he's saying like this, you can do a lot of things with tofu. What are you complaining about? You understand? And he can't understand why the housewives all across the country want to stone him. What's wrong with herring and yogurt? It's very nutritious. I can show you from the nutritionist. It works out there. She actually likes that. Okay. Es gefindt sich ein Meshuggah in every crowd, All right? He defends his program in the Knesset, right? In other words, he has no hesitation. He's sincere. He has no hesitation in saying that, all the complaints against us are just ruined, and you can't knock him down. Listen to this. He makes a whole speech, and he says, the absence of butter does not mean a thing, since we provide margarine at 1/6 of the cost, and we enrich it with vitamins, so that there's no way inferior to butter. It is known to all the scientists in the world, and I hereby declare with all due responsibility, the diet we have is perfectly adequate, and no one will starve, but everyone will remain in good health. There are countries such as France, which are known for their fine food, and people prefer small fish. How come the Jews in Israel don't like small fish? They think that the French think that small fish, the flesh is tastier and finer. Jews like big fish for some reason. And if you don't give it to them, they're disappointed. When you come to sell them small fish, they want to pay for it. This is a problem. Begin shouts out, can the public eat statistics? And Dov Yosef is completely impervious to this. He goes on, you can eat unlimited amount of foods, of available bread, of the available codfish. That was also a big deal. You can have all the coddies you want, all right? From now till ever. You can also have lentils, oats, yogurt, skim cheese. You can eat the kilogram and a half of sugar you get every month. We're not starving. We shall have to reduce the meat ration to 540 grams per month. This is not the average amount, because sick people employed in physical labor and others will get more. I'm afraid we're also going to have to ration chocolate and toilet soap. Okay? We hope not to have to reduce the large amount of soap, but only to regulate its use so that everyone will get as much as they need. The statement of Knesset member Nir that a small child cannot subsist on 150 grams a day is just wrong. A child certainly can, and I got the figures to show it. When a couple gets married, we shall issue them enough points to enable them to buy sheets and pillowcases with which to start their married life. We are all in favor of family, things. People have said to me, what? Only 70 points for pregnant women? It won't be enough for a dress and diapers. Gentlemen, I reject this argument. A diaper costs 2 points, so the woman can buy 10 diapers, or 12 diapers at 24 points. People scream, that's not enough, right? No, she will still have 46 points left, and she'll be able to buy 3 dresses for the baby, a blanket for the baby, and even a dress for herself. Ha! This is the stuff these are the debates going on in the Knesset in 49 and 50. A dress made in the most fashionable style and costing much more than a plain dress will not cost more points than a plain one if the amount of fabric used is the same, provided the 2 dresses contain the same amount of fabric, and so on and so on and so forth. And he doesn't see that he's losing the battle for the hearts and minds. That's the point. And without the hearts and minds, a system like this is not going to go over there. Yes, he was. Big business, naturally, and he was. And by the way, he asked me if he was married. He was married. And I want to say this again. He meant well. You understand? And he did with a patriot. No question about it. And eventually, he got the blame for all of this. But the system was flawed. That's what I'm trying to argue tonight. Is structurally problematic. It's not that he cheated. He didn't. And he himself, I don't know, but I'm sure he didn't do like the others that they skipped on the side. He probably ate three pieces of chatzim every day. That's who he is. No one can fault him on personal integrity or anything like that. It's the policy that we're dealing with over here. And cheating, big business in Israel naturally cheats, and they do in America. They sell all their best stuff on the black market. After all, why should you manufacture something given the government prices and you get 5 times that much, in a back room in Tel Aviv somewhere in Haifa? The government responds by raiding factories. Then the government raids kibbutzim. Kibbutzim are found, with illegal contraband. Shame. They have the paper booze. This is terrible. The kibbutz should be the vanguard of the thing. Vanguard, schmangard. The guys in the kibbutz also want to get a swimming pool, and if you sell enough things on the side, well, they have money for the swimming pool. By 1950-51, let's put it this way, Dov Yosef and the whole thing become a political albatross. In the elections of 1951, which were the second elections for the Knesset, the bourgeois party, the party of the middle class, went from 7 to 20. The general Zionists, they call it. 7 they tripled. You understand? And they ride the popular resentment on the slogan, Tnu lichyot ba'aretz hazu. Let us live in this country. Get the heck off our backs. Tnu lichyot ba'aretz hazu. Let us live. It's stifling. You can't handle it. Now, there's Dov Yosef. What do you mean? You can do it. You have enough of grain every day. You have enough of points of this, and enough of this. Tnu lichyot ba'aretz hazu. And they ride that slogan to victory. Look at this. This is a poster from the General Zionist Party. Today it's part of Likud. What does it say over here? Nishachrer et habidigna. Let us liberate the state from protectia and mikavle hamishtar ha'umlal, right? From the clutches of the evil regime, right? And who's the evil regime? Ben-Gurion's not evil, but he wants me to chatzilim all the time. You know what I'm saying? He won't let me get my chicken for Rosh Hashanah. And he make me wait 3 hours, and there was nothing there at the end of the day. One can laugh all they want, but when the electorate has the opportunity to express its resentment, it will do so. That's all. They call that democracy where I come from. You understand? Ben-Gurion sees that Mapai is losing the Tel Aviv middle-class vote. In fact, they permanently lost it. Ever since then, this is the reason why you have a Likud, and besides Begin, I'm talking about the used to have what they call the Liberal Party. The Begin's party is a combination of the Cherut and the Liberal Party. There was a large Liberal Party which used to get the middle-class vote in the Tel Aviv general area, which is the biggest community, of course, in Israel. And they say, I'm not voting for Mapai, enough of these crazy nuts. They want to stifle everything. I want free enterprise, and especially, I want that the chicken should not be rationed. If I want to have 4 eggs, I want to have 4 eggs. Get off my back. That's what I have today. You understand? If I want to, I don't want to make tofu salad or something like that. I want to make, I want to make gribinas. I know it's bad for you. I want to make gribinas. Something like that. And Mapai is becoming hated, and Mapai is becoming synonymous with Dov Yosef. The new government, therefore, when Ben-Gurion forms a new government, and he keeps his 45 votes by stealing it, like by the crooked politics we saw in Sal Shabati. You understand? They lost the vote of the regular Israelis. They kept the vote through shtick of the immigrants. Right? Now, you might say that wasn't wrong, but that's what happened. The new government, therefore, starts to dismantle it little by little, but price controls of basic goods will remain throughout the 50s. The last price controls get rid of in 1959, when Pinchas Sapir comes in. So it's just that's part of life in Israel. You see, during these years, the worst stuff of they get rid of in 1953, right? But there's still plenty left over that they do afterwards, when they will shift to a different sort of a strategy for the government to control the economy, which also won't work so great, but will not be as much in people's faces as it was recently. Dov Yosef's career is ruined. He is the scapegoat. Ben Gurion and Mapai clearly make him the scapegoat, and he was just doing what they told him to do. I'll say again, no one contests the fact that he meant well, he was honest, all the rest of it. They told him to do it, and he did it enthusiastically, but, politics is politics. You want a friend, like I told you, get a dog, If you become a liability, if you live in liability, it's in there. Now this is an interesting story, obviously, but I'm not doing this just because it's an interesting story. I'm doing this because it's like prohibition. It had permanent cultural bad results. Prohibition in American history led to the mafia and to the rise of organized crime. If it had been prohibition, it wouldn't have happened the way it happened. But you all know what I'm talking about, right? So even when they got rid of prohibition, the organized crime still stayed there and is still here today. It's not true. Similarly, in Israel, the tzena led to a permanent black market, which was there for decades. I look around the crowd, I see there are many of you who remember, I'm sure you remember, the black market of one form or another. And to a little bit it still extends in there, depending where you cash your money and things like that, right? But the idea that in America you don't have black market, do you? We don't have it, except maybe for drugs, like I said before. But a normal person who's not involved with regular drugs, you want something, you get it. It costs more, it costs less, that's your business. You get too much in the hole, that's what happens to people. Yeah? But we have a consumerist economy, as they call it over here. The tzena led to a permanent black market, as well as to a mentality on the part of the Israeli public that the government is the enemy, the laws have to be circumvented, and ultimate success lies through protexia. It's very unhealthy for economic situation. All which are toxic economic phenomena, which retard or prevent healthy economic growth. You understand? Notice, it's not what Adam Smith and Alexander Hamilton were all about. They said, let the market do its thing. Of course, there will be carbonos. They're pretty ruthless about that. There will be people that suffer along the way. But overall, it'll move constantly higher. You understand? Best example of what I'm talking about is the United States of America after the Civil War. Between the Civil War and World War I, as the era of the robber barons, right? And Rockefeller and Carnegie and all these guys that were ruthless sweatshops. All that is true, no question about it. There was a lot of human suffering. On the other side, the American economy became the #1 in the world, and everybody eventually benefited in the sense that it became the most advanced technological economy, the refrigerator economy, so to speak, the automobile economy and all the rest of it. Eventually it's good for everybody. But you understand, a lot of people don't want to say like this, I'm only here once. I don't want to be the one that suffers so that eventually the economy will get better. I want here and now. And this is a permanent, human kind of dilemma which will never get followed. The Israeli economy would then become a weird phenomenon with government intervention, but also with protexia-driven private enterprise, but with economics decisions not being made on economic bases. This characterized the Israeli economy until recently. Okay, and I'm sure you followed the paper. Stanley Fischer just resigned. Who knows if they're going to go back to the old ways as well? And the fundamental dysfunctions of the Israeli economy were just compensated for by money from Germany, from America, from World Jewelry. So it's not a way to run a business, but it's simply saying, it's like a rich guy that follows to start a business. If it messes up, I'll write you a check. You understand? The business has still been bad, I'll write you another check. Right? Happens a lot of time with son-in-laws. They don't want to come into business. Start your own business. It'll cost me less money to finance some stupid thing than if you get in my business. Right? So that's what happens over here. But really, is this a way to run a business? You see? So that's what I wanted to end with as far as the tzena is concerned. You see, it really is an important, it's not just a cute or piquant era in Israeli history, but it's a formative one in the economic and therefore in the culture. The other story that I don't have time to go into now is the years 49-52 also witnessed crucial developments, I would argue, vis-a-vis the Haredim. Immediately after the end of the war, in May of 49, so the tzena is April 49, May, the war is still on, just winding down. the first time the Haredi Jews in Yerushalayim began the long struggle to conquer Geula. You all know what Geula is, and today it's synonymous with Haredim, with ultra-Orthodox. Geula was actually built by this guy who wasn't from Avram Chasidov, a Olev from Russia, from Tsarist Russia, from Gruzia, Georgian Jew, and his daughter's name was Geula. Like around here, the guy's name was Glenn, and all these streets that we all inhabit, right? Whatever the builder was, so he named after his daughter. It was meant to be a modern neighborhood in Yerushalayim with movies and all the rest of it. That's when it was first a mixed neighborhood, at least. It's famous. The Rav Kook, already in his time, was leading peaceful fights against the movies on Friday night. There are many stories. Now, he didn't believe in violence or anything like that, but he would go and walk up and down in front of the movies and all the rest. In Yerushalayim, in Geula, imagine a block away from Esh Sharm. You know what I'm talking about, okay? And this is where the situation of the religious observance was holding in pre-1948 Jerusalem, although do remember one thing. Half the city was Arabs. Arabs can go to the movies on Friday night. You see what I'm saying? Businesses, if it's a Jewish store is open on Saturday, you can have non-Jewish customers. When the city was under the British, the mixed nature of the population modified the dynamics of what's Shomer Shabbos, not Shomer Shabbos. A little bit like America. The first rumblings that we have of what we would call today strong Haredi protests, here I'm talking about the groups that were formed in the Neturei Karta, come from the 1930s, because they have soccer games. You know where Rehov Shmuel HaNavi is? I assume most of you do. It's not far from Geula. Okay, let's put it that way. And the British had a police school there, and on Saturdays that's when they had the football, the soccer games. And all of a sudden, tons of Jews start showing up. And I have here, this came out recently, Mishnato Shel Rabbi Amram. It's from Amram Blau, who's the founder and head of the Neturei Karta. This is what they call in English ultra-Orthodox, okay, in Yerushalayim. And he says over there, I remember when I was young, in the 30s, whatever, in the middle of shul on Saturday morning, you hear people say, "Go!" You can hear from all the way, and the whole crowd shouts it, and things like this, and very disturbing to people like him. Okay, now he's in Rehov Mei Sharim, but you can the noise travels. More and more Jews start to participate, and guys like him start to make machaot. Marx makes a protest. It's under the British. Now, it's not like violent like the way they did later on. And he actually is famous, and he wore it like a badge of honor. He got to Habe'ita Hayedua, the famous kick. Because apparently a British policeman gave him a big kick that, maybe crippled him or something like that. But he got a kick for Shabbos. Because he was sacrificed, he suffered on a high ideal. It made him a hero, you see. Siege of 1948. And the emergence of the Neturei Karta. What are you talking about? Very briefly. I don't know how you do this very briefly, but very briefly, there used to be Jews in a city called Jerusalem. You heard of that, right? And if you go back 100 years ago, literally 100 years ago before the First World War, so there was a bunch of Jews living in Jerusalem who were organized loosely into what they call the Jewish community of Jerusalem, just like Jews were organized throughout the Ottoman Empire into autonomous, legal, self-governing Jewish communities. It was a little bit tricky because some were Litvish and some were Hasidish and some were this and that and the other. They argued over the money, but that's nothing new in Jewish history. Then comes the Balfour Declaration and the British occupation in 1918-1919. And then the British Balfour Declaration recognizes the Zionist movement as the official boss of things in Israel. Right? I told you that is part of the Balfour Declaration and of the San Remo Treaty in international law. It's called the Jewish Agency. The Jewish Agency is identical to the World Zionist Organization. And so they try and they say like this: we're going to make the Kehillah in Yerushalayim. There was a sufficient number of very frum Jews to say, you're not going to make the Kehillah in Yerushalayim. You're not frum. You're atheist. You're this, that, and the other. This is where Rav Kook got involved in the whole mess. Whatever he did was wrong. Okay? But the end of the story is he went with the Zionists, and he said we can have a religious Kehillah. There'll be people who won't be religious. We'll work it out. Those who didn't agree with that and disagree very strongly, Chaim Sonnenfeld, they said we'll make Eidah HaCharedis. Right? The Haredi Eidah, separate community, which means we can't stop you guys, but we can make our own. We non-participate. And they got permission from the British to have a separate community since it's based on religious principles, which it was. Okay? The Eidah HaCharedis is there. The Agudas Yisrael comes to Palestine after the British take over in the 1920s. They're more or less on the same page. But as time goes on, especially in the 30s, especially after the rise of Hitler, the Eidah HaCharedis and the Aguda especially become insufficiently hostile to Zionism for some. they were distinctly hostile to Zionism. They were totally opposed to it as a philosophy. But on the other hand, they said, listen, the Arabs are here. We're trying to get people in from Hitler. We have to make certain, they're not going away, the Zionists. The people are here. Let's try to be somewhat accommodationist, even a little bit. That was too much for some, okay? And for Satmar, for example, things like that. And the result is they broke away and called Neturei Karta. So Neturei Karta, in other words, holds that the Eida Haredis is insufficiently from. That's what it is, on the political side of things. And, this is the politics of Israel, and we know the cell division, it constantly divides. Right now, the Neturei Karta is divided into 4 or 5 fractions. The main issue is Ahmadinejad. Get it? Some say it's okay to kiss up to Ahmadinejad. Others say, no, we should be poisonally, in a powerful manner, be opposed to Zionism. We should burn the Israeli flag and all the rest of it. But you don't go to a Holocaust denial conference in Tehran. And the others say, why not? So you get that sort of thing. But I'm taking you back now to 1948 when the Neturei Karta already exists as a very small group. It's a radical and a marginal group, but they seek to influence the silent majority of Haredim to push for the surrender of the city to the Arabs in March of 1948. Because March of 48 is when the height or the depths of the siege was happening. As a maximum starvation, it looked like Israel was not going to win in March of 48. I don't expect you to remember everything I said last year, but in April of 48 is when the Jews went on the offensive, Operation Dalet, right? But until then, it was tough. You know the story. The cars get shot up on the way by the Arabs. It was really tough. And to the Neturei Karta, and therefore they're trying to influence the rest of the Haredim, they said, the Zionists is going to get us all killed. It'll be a big pogrom. On the other hand, keep the British here, or make a deal with the Mufti or with King Abdullah or something. Be realistic, okay? And you can't argue one way or the other because they can always say like this. Look, we're Yochanan ben Zakkai. Right? What did Yochanan ben Zakkai do? He went to the Romans to try to make a deal. You could call him a traitor if you would, but he didn't think he was a traitor, and he wasn't. And so they seek to influence the silent majority, push around the city. There's a big march that they call Hafganat Degel Halavan, the White Flag March, in which they all go from Rehov Mea Shearim. They want to go to the British headquarters that are still left there. And on Kikar Shabbat, talking about Geula Street, there's a whole Dov Yosef, there's a whole group over there, and he says, you take another step and we'll shoot. We'll kill everybody over here. And they actually do shoot over their heads, and that put an end to that particular demonstration. And then a month or two later, the Jews start winning, So by late 1948, as a result of the Israeli victory, and the division of the city, because what happened? Yerushalayim was split half and half. And I think many of us are able to remember a little bit what it was like at that time. So, and I think, I assume if you're here tonight, you've probably been in Israel, and chances are you know what I'm talking about when I talk about Yerushalayim. So think about the following. The road from the Schneller army base to the Mandelbaum Gate runs through Mea Shearim. You get it? I'm talking about what we call Geula Street, right? Malchi Yisrael. So, so the army is constantly going. Yeah, that's right. But here you go straight into Mea Shearim, because on the other side is the Mandelbaum Gate. That's the front lines with the Jordanians. You see? So my point is like this. You have the creation of a potentially explosive situation because constant army trucks on Rehov Mea Shearim every Shabbos. Going back and forth. Now, it's supposed to be for military purposes. And that's Pekuach Nefesh. They can understand. But and I know, army guys are going to drive through their Stamazoi, right? They're not going to keep it all still for military. People are people. Army guys, they run back and forth. Plus, they probably call out a few good names and all the rest of it, and they embitter the Haredim, which plays into the hands of the Neturei Karta. So here you are, a very religious Jew living, talking about in Mea Shearim section, and this is not your Shabbos. It's driving back and forth. If it's to help with the Jordanians is one thing, but if it's time because the guy wants to have a joyride with his girlfriend, which is half the time the case, then it gets really angry. Movie theaters used to have Arab customers, so if they're not open on Friday nights, if they were open on Friday nights, the Chilul Shabbos aspect was not as blatant. But after the war is over, they only have Jewish customers. So if there's going to be a movie theater, like the famous Edison Theater, which we'll talk about in a minute, anybody it's my age also remembers that. So right in the middle of Geula, in May of 49, the Neturei Karta starts to organize semi-violent demonstrations in front of the Edison movie theater. What do I mean semi-violent demonstrations? You say Shabbos, and people are standing in line, and you start to jostle with them. Next thing you know, you're fighting and all the rest of it. The cops show up, A hits B, B hits C, who did it, who didn't do it, you end up with that. Customers are jostled, strongly heckled. The police react, but for the first time in history, it's a new cultural reality. The Haredim have a political party in the Knesset which protests police brutality. You understand? In other words, the Aguda, now these guys were not from the Aguda, but the Aguda, in order to have any kind of traction, says we have to protect anybody who's fighting for Shabbos. Do you see how I'm saying? You see how the politics of it works out? And therefore, for the first time, the police is not like under the British. Under the British, you may recall, there was no government, there was no parliament whatsoever. It was a dictatorship of the High Commissioner. And the Jewish community had its own government, which was purely Zionist. So there are no Haredim in it whatsoever. But now, as a result of the established state of Israel, you have Arabs in the Knesset, but you also have the Aguda. And if you have the Aguda, every time some religious Jew is beat up, there's going to be a big protest in the government. And may I say that youngsters and certainly the Torah Karta are therefore encouraged to continue protesting. Geula starts to reflect a very tense situation. The Haredim go in the Spatzir. This was culture at that time. What if you live in Mea Sharm or around there, and for Shabbos afternoon you go for a walk. You know, right? They used to call it the parade, right? The parade. You go for a walk, like we have everywhere. And so where do you go up and down Geula? Isn't that right? I mean, you're not walking to Tel Aviv. You go up and down Geula. Tenuva headquarters was in that street. That's the big milk people and the cheese. And so trucks are coming in all Saturday, bringing in the food. Now they're only supposed to come after Shabbos over, but you know how it goes. And from Kibbutz Ramat Achel and from this kibbutz and that one, and so you end up with a situation which is explosive. Because imagine the street full of frum families. I mean, Yerushalayim frum families, Haredim, walking up and down Rehov Geula, and in the street, Israel, and here comes a truck, and everybody has to get out of the way, and this one shouts at this one shouts at this one. It's a gasoline waiting for a match. You see, the Tenuva is there. The Tenuva gets milk all the time, as I said before. The Tzahal is in the Schneller, which is a block up. It's a military trucks are driving back and forth right through the crowds of the Haredi paraders. Finally, there's some secular local Jews who live over there, and they want to drive whatever they want to drive on Shabbos. They want to get whatever they want to get, all right through the dense traffic of the human beings. This is what's here. There's only a question of time before some young teens start throwing stones, right? Not only Shabbos, but next thing you know, it gets out of there. The harsh winter of 1949 kept demonstrators at home shivering because there's no central heat in Israel at that time. But the spring and the summer of 1950 brings them out. The police have to intervene. They try to prevent stone throwing and name calling. They end up tussling with the Haredim. One thing leads to another. The Nazis, the fanatics, and the police called them fanatics. They called them Nazis. And the police start hitting people. The main person's hit and eventually arrested are all the Torah Karta types like him. Every time he gets arrested, you play into his hands as a martyr. No, you get it? In other words, let me put it this way. This is a political struggle, but they didn't perceive it as that. A political struggle, like political warfare, like terrorist warfare, has its own rules, and the goals are different. You follow? And the goals over here to get traction among your constituency and to legitimate the Torah Karta stance, at least on this issue, in the broader masses of different people. Because the Torah Karta is like 50, 100 families at the most. Ordinarily, an arrest stigmatizes someone as a negative person. But here, since it's defending Shabbos, the arrests and the beat-ups glamorize the Torah Karta and turn them into martyrs. Rav Amram Blau is well aware of this, as the cops are not, that this is what's happening, is that the Torah Karta is being propelled from marginal status to mainstream, which is the opposite of what the police want to do. The Chilunim are aroused. This is the son of Jabotinsky, who was a doctor, a math professor in Israel. Vladimir Jabotinsky, was a staunch secularist. Let's get this straight. Okay? He was an atheist. Menachem Begin wasn't, but Jabotinsky was a staunch atheist and a secularist. He said, like in America, you can be as frum as you want, but you don't bother me and I don't bother you. I should be 100% legal that I drive in front of your house on Shabbos. I don't protest when you walk around your Shama Kapata. Get it? He was a 19th century European liberal in this regard. That don't go nowhere in Israel, does it? And so instead, what's happening now is that he forms the League Against Kfiyat Datit, League Against Religious Coercion, and he says, let's the Chilunim, we outnumber them, let's go together. If they want to beat us up, let's beat them up. And in other words, not for sadistic purposes, but to teach them a lesson and restore a basic law and order in the society and let everybody do what they want to do. They want to turn the Geula situation into a test case to defend Chiloni rights. On August 12th, 1950, in Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul, truckloads of kibbutzniks from the Mapam, Hashem Artzair, drive into Geula, and they start walking around beating up all the frummies. Okay? They even invade the Chevron Yeshiva, which is there, and start beating up all the Bachrim, except the Kavaners are the wrong guys to mess with because they had a 1929 pogrom, and they said, once is enough, thank you very much. And so you walk into a Shabbos afternoon in Geula, and it's a war, you see? But this leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. After all, the Israelis say to themselves, do we really want to go back to 1929? That was the Mufti, right? We're Israel. It shouldn't be this way. What I'm trying to say is like this. The Frum have a cultural advantage that the Chilonim in general, at least at that time, felt guilty if they're beating up Frum people simply because that's what the Nazis do. That's what the Arabs do. You follow? And so Jabotinsky will say, big deal. They're going after us. We have to go after them. It doesn't work. Politically, Ben-Gurion is very vulnerable in August of 1950, as I've tried to lay out earlier tonight. The summer of 1950 is when the Mapam is going through a massive loss of confidence thanks to Dov Yosef and the austerity program. And so Ben-Gurion desperately needs these guys. Needs the Aguda in the cabinet. He has like 62 altogether. You know now Bibi is trying to put together a government. You know how hard it is. It was hard at that time. And therefore, he cannot afford to alienate the Aguda over something which is not a matter of national importance. You know, mass aliyah is national importance. Building up an army is national importance. Getting into the United Nations and dealing with the Arab threat is a national importance. Who should be in a movie theater in Geula on Friday night? And the end of the day, it's not a national importance. You see? And so it's funny how all these things come together. And more importantly than that, the kibbutzniks, they want to take up their time every Saturday. Now, here we end up with a very, very important factor in all this. And that's stick-to-itiveness. The Haredim live there. And they're just naturally fired up due to the chemistry that I just described by the Chil Shabbos. And there will always be these real frum types that will always want to make something out of it, a hafganah. And to be perfectly honest, a demonstration is fun. Right? True or not? You know, I know you can laugh at it, but what I'm saying is, it's fun to participate in for certain types. And the Chilonim mistakenly thought that a single show of force would cow the Haredim. But in fact, a process of radicalism and political consciousness raising is happening in the Haredi world, which is leading them to demonstrate each and every Shabbos. I repeat, each and every Shabbos. It becomes the thing to do. Okay? And it's only a block away from where you live. And it's where you live. And so another guy says, I want to go to the weekend to, with my girlfriend to the beach or something. Yeah. Once in a while I'll do this. But I'm not going to fight literally every Saturday to keep the movie theater open or the Tenuva cars running. What Israel learns early on is something that we're always looking at with surprise today, and that is kfiyat datit, religious coercion. The Chilonim are okay with it. Surprisingly, they're willing to tolerate it as long as it doesn't interfere in their own, front yard, and even sometimes when it does. Here we are 65 years after the founding of Israel. It's the only country in the world where you can't get married or divorced without an Orthodox rabbi. You might be someone who hates that and is totally opposed to it. As someone in the kibbutz, they do it. There's no big movement, although the reform movement is always trying to get steam on this. They are never able to generate any kind of steam. Just like they're not able to generate any kind of big steam over the fact that the discrimination at the kotel, where the women are davening, all the rest of it. And people, this lady gets the red and that lady gets the red. It doesn't generate a lot of steam. It just is what it is. And so Eri Jabotinsky gets no traction. And the Chilonim, even today, whatever they say, are still willing to put up with not joining the army. Say what you want. It's a political football. But here, for 65 years, they're okay with it. And so sociologists haven't done really an adequate job. Don't believe most of the stuff you read. They haven't done an adequate job of trying to calibrate and to understand the mass majority culture and psychology of the public in Israel, which is very fascinating on this regard. There's a guilty conscience involved over there. After all the people in the kibbutzim, the grandfather was some from guy back in Europe. That's what it is. Including Ben-Gurion, by the way. He even told Moshe Brilliant, when a journalist 10 years later, he says, how can I hate the guy? He looks like my Zaidi. You understand? No. These cultural things go deep, deep, deep. There's also the understandable bourgeois desire for a trouble-free life. Some guys like hafganot, like demonstrations and throwing bricks. Most normal people don't. Okay? And most normal people say like this, just move out of Geula, and that's what they do. Over the course of the 1950s, all the Chilonim who are there just move. And if you move, then the problem's over. You see? there's a fear nationally of a fractious Kulturkampf. You understand? A big fight or a matter of civil war. You know, they don't want to break out a violent civil war among the populations. And Ben-Gurion is very afraid of that. Whatever it is, a sociological process emerges whereby the Chilonim won't fight, they just move away. None of this happens overnight. Throughout the 1950s, the so-called Kikar Shabbat sees demonstrations, police brutality, cynical political and media exploitation, etc., the usual sort of thing. But in the long run, the Haredim will win because of persistence. In the very long run, demographics will render the whole question moot. I showed you the famous movie theater of the Edison movie. Today, I mean this, by the way, it's Satmar. They bought it. That's the Satmar gathering at the Edison movie theater, right? That's not what anybody had in mind in 1949. But what that means is, that's a baby boom. You get it? No, you just have the numbers, and they just buy naturally things up, and then they'll just move away. And so, very, very interesting dynamics. That's a story, however, that lies in the future. That's for next year. For this year, we are done.